Everyone knows Lucy. She's the rock star of human evolution. Found in Ethiopia back in 1974, she was a game changer. A small bodied creature just over 3 feet tall, she had long arms and a small ape like brain. But her pelvis and her leg bones were a dead giveaway. She walked upright on 2 legs. Just like us, Lucy was a member of the species Australopithecus afarensis. She lived around 3.2 million years ago. For a long time, she was seen as the starting point, the matriarch of humanity. The first one to really get the hang of this walking thing. It felt like a clean story. Apes were in the trees. Then Lucy came down, stood up, and started the long march toward us. But science is never that simple. The story is always messier, more interesting. And the big question always lingered. If Lucy was walking so well, so confidently, she couldn't have been the first. She was too good at it. Evolution doesn't just produce a finished product overnight. There must have been earlier models, the experiments, the prototypes. So, who was our ancestor before Lucy? Who was that creature that took the first truly wobbly steps away from the apes? To find them, we have to travel further back in time, past Lucy's 3.2 million years. We have to go to a world that was different, a time when Africa was changing. The great forests were beginning to shrink, patches of woodland and grassland were opening up. This changing world was the stage for our story. It was the problem that our ancestors had to solve. And their solution, eventually, was to stand up. The answer to our question, the best one we have right now, has a name. Ardi. Her full scientific name is Ardipithecus ramidus, and she is a revelation. She lived in what is now Ethiopia, just like Lucy, but much earlier. Way earlier. And Ardi's bones are dated to 4.4 million years ago. That's more than a million years before Lucy. A million years is a vast amount of evolutionary time. Enough time for a lot of change. The team that found Ardi spent 15 years putting her together. It was a painstaking process. Her skeleton was crushed. The bones were brittle and chalky. They had to be carefully excavated and digitally reconstructed. But what they pieced together changed everything we thought we knew about her origins. Ardi was not what anyone expected. Let's start with her feet. Her feet are maybe the most important part of her story. They tell a tale of two worlds. She had a grasping big toe. It stuck out to the side, a bit like an ape's thumb. This was a toe for climbing, for holding onto tree branches. She was clearly at home in the trees. So she's an ape, right? Not so fast. The other bones in her foot were different. That they were more rigid. They didn't have the flexibility of a chimp's foot. This rigidity suggests her foot was acting like a lever. A lever to push off the ground when she walked. This is a key feature for bipedal walking. So her foot was a mosaic, part climber, part walker. She was doing something new. Something transitional. She could move through the trees, but she could also walk on 2 legs on the ground. She wasn't a knuckle walker like a chimp or gorilla. The bones in her wrist prove that. Her hands were flexible, not built to support her weight on the ground. Now let's move up to her pelvis. The pelvis is the smoking gun for bipedalism. It's what told us Lucy walked upright. Ardi's pelvis was also a mosaic. The top part was short and broad, more like a human pelvis than an ape pelvis. This shape provides stability for walking on 2 legs. It helps support the upper body without toppling over. But the bottom part of her pelvis was more ape-like. It was built for powerful leg muscles, great for climbing. So, again, we see this mix. A creature that was not fully committed to the ground, but was also not fully committed to the trees. She was navigating a world that was a mix of both, and her body reflected that. The scientists who studied her think she walked upright on the ground, but did so carefully. She wasn't a runner like us. In the trees, she would have moved along the tops of branches on all fours, using that grasping big toe for security. What about her head? Her skull was small. Her brain was about the size of a chimpanzee's brain. So the old idea that we stood up to free our hands, which then led to bigger brains, gets more complicated. Walking upright came way, way before big brains, millions of years before. The face was also more primitive than Lucy's. It projected forward more. But there was one crucial detail in her skull, her teeth. Her canine teeth, the sharp pointy ones, were small. In apes like chimpanzees and gorillas, the males have huge dagger-like canines. They use them for fighting, for intimidating other males, for competing over females. And Ardi's canines, both male and female, were small and blunt, more like ours. This is a huge clue. It suggests a different kind of social life, a life with less male-on-male aggression. Maybe it hints at a shift towards something more cooperative. Perhaps males weren't fighting each other for dominance. Maybe they were pair bonding with females, helping to provide food. This is speculation, of course. We can't know for sure, but the teeth are strong evidence that something fundamental about their social structure had changed. It was a step away from the ape model and a step towards the human one, so who was Ardi? Well, she wasn't a chimpanzee, she wasn't a human, she was something entirely different. The team that discovered her said it best. She shows us that the last common ancestor we shared with chimps was not a chimp. That might sound obvious, but it was a revolutionary idea. For years, we kind of assumed that our last common ancestor was very chimp-like, and that we evolved away from that. Here, Ardi suggests that both humans and chimps have evolved in very different directions from that common ancestor. Our chimps evolved their own specializations, like knuckle walking. We evolved ours, like bipedalism. Ardi gives us a glimpse of what something closer to that common starting point might have looked like. And where did she live? This was another shock. The old theory was called the savanna hypothesis. The idea was that our ancestors were forced out of the trees as the forest dried up and turned into open grassland. On the savanna, standing up tall would have been an advantage. You could see over the grass. You could spot predators, you could free your hands to carry food or tools. It was a neat story. But Ardi's remains were found alongside fossils of other animals and plants. These fossils told a clear story. Ardi lived in a woodland, a place with trees, but not a dense, closed canopy forest. This killed the simple savanna hypothesis. Our ancestors didn't start walking because they were forced onto a treeless plain. They started walking while they were still living among the trees. Why? We don't know for sure. Maybe it was more efficient for carrying food back to a mate or offspring. Maybe it helped regulate body temperature. The debate continues, but Ardi proved that the why was more complicated than we thought. So, Ardi is our best answer for who came before Lucy. She is the most complete skeleton we have of a hominin from that crucial period between 4 and 6 million years ago. She is our link to a deeper past, a creature perfectly adapted to her time, but also carrying the seeds of our own future in her strange, mixed-up body. But the story doesn't even stop there. Science is always digging deeper, pushing the timeline back. Ardi is our best look at a pre-Lucy ancestor, but there are other, more ghostly figures lurking even further back in time. Their remains are fragmentary, a piece of jaw here, a thigh bone there, a crushed skull. They are controversial, but they give us tantalizing hints of an even older story. Let's go back to around 6 million years ago. In the Tugen Hills of Kenya, researchers found a few fossil fragments. A couple of jaw pieces, some teeth, and most importantly, parts of 3 femurs or thigh bones. They named this creature Orrorin tugenensis, which means original man from the Tugen region. It's often nicknamed Millennium Man. The femur is the key piece of evidence. The shape of the top of the femur, the part that fits into the hip socket, is very telling. In humans, the head of the femur is large and spherical, and the neck connecting it to the shaft is long. This is a direct result of the stresses of walking on 2 legs. The Orrorin femur has these features. The outer layer of bone is also thicker on the bottom of the femoral neck than on the top, another hallmark of bipedalism. If this interpretation is correct, then Orrorin was walking on 2 legs 6 million years ago. That's 1.5 million years before Ardi. That's a huge deal, but the evidence is not a full skeleton. It's just a bone, and some scientists are not convinced. They argue that these features could also be found in an ape that climbed in a particular way. The debate is fierce. The other bones, like the arm bone, suggest it was also a very good climber. So, like Ardi, Orrorin was probably comfortable both in the trees and on the ground. Yes, but if it was bipedal, it pushes the origin of walking back much further than we ever thought. And we can go back even further. The oldest potential hominin we have found so far is truly ancient. Its name is Sahelanthropus chidensis. Its skull was found in the desert of Chad in Central Africa, thousands of miles away from the famous fossil sites in East Africa. This itself was a surprise. It suggested our early ancestors were spread across a much wider area than we knew. The skull was nicknamed Toumaï, which means hoop of life in the local language. It's dated to somewhere between 6 and 7 million years ago. That is incredibly old. So that is right around the time that genetic studies suggest the human and chimpanzee lineages split. If Toumaï is a hominin, it is right at the base of our family tree. It could be the very first member of our lineage after the Great Split. The skull is a strange mix of features. From the back, it looks a lot like a chimpanzee. It had a small brain, but from the front, it looks more advanced. It has a flatter face than an ape and smaller canine teeth, just like Ardi. But the most important feature is a hole at the base of the skull called the foramen magnum. This is where the spinal cord connects to the brain. In an ape that walks on four legs, like a chimp, this hole is at the back of the skull, pointing backwards. Their head juts forward from their spine. In a human that walks on two legs, this hole is at the bottom of the skull, pointing downwards. Our head sits balanced on top of our spine. Where is the hole on Toumaï? It appears to be positioned forward, more like a human's than a chimp's. This suggests that Toumaï held its head upright, which suggests it had an upright posture, which suggests it walked on two legs. But there's a problem. The skull is badly crushed and distorted. It was squashed flat over millions of years. Reconstructing it is a major challenge. Some scientists argue that the position of the foramen magnum is an illusion caused by this distortion. They argue that Toumaï is not a hominin at all, but an ancestor of gorillas or chimps. Another team later claimed to have found a femur of Sahelanthropus that did not support bipedalism, but that claim is also heavily debated. So, is Toumaï our oldest ancestor? We don't know for sure. It's a tantalizing clue. A ghostly photograph from the dawn of our existence. We need more bones. We need a pelvis. We need a foot. Until then, Toumaï remains a beautiful, frustrating question mark. So, where does this leave us? We have a clear line of sight back to Lucy, the accomplished walker of 3.2 million years ago. Before her, we have Ardi, at 4.4 million years ago. She is our most solid ancestor from this earlier time. A creature of the woodlands who could climb and walk, a creature with a new social structure. She is the bridge. Before Ardi, things get murky. We have Orrorin at 6 million years ago with a thigh bone that screams bipedalism to summon ape to others. And then we have Toumaï at nearly 7 million years ago, a crushed skull that might be the very first of our kind, or might be a red herring. This is how paleoanthropology works. It's not about certainty. It's about building a story from the tiniest scraps of evidence. It's a puzzle with most of the pieces missing. Each new fossil is like finding a new piece. Sometimes it fits perfectly, sometimes it forces you to rethink the entire picture. What this journey back in time tells us is that the old, simple story of human evolution is wrong. So you know the one. The famous March of Progress illustration. A knuckle-walking ape slowly stands up, becomes a stooped caveman, and then a modern human, all in a straight line. That image is powerful, but it's a lie. Evolution is not a line. It's a bush. A messy, branching bush. Over the last 7 million years, there were many different species of hominins. Many different experiments in how to be a bipedal ape. Ardi's species was one. Lucy's species was another. There were others that we found, like Australopithecus anamensis, who lived between Ardi and Lucy. And there were surely dozens of others that we will never find. They lived for a while, and then they went extinct. They were dead ends on the bush. They were not all our direct ancestors. They were our cousins, our great uncles and great aunts, evolutionarily speaking. For most of our history, we shared the planet with other kinds of humans. It's only in the last 30,000 years or so that we, Homo sapiens, have been the only hominin left. The story before Lucy also teaches us what really made us human, and in what order. For a long time, we thought our defining feature was our big brain. We thought our intelligence was what set us apart from the apes, and everything else followed from that. The fossils tell a different story. The first thing that happened was a change in our social structure. Toumaï, Ardi, and their kin had smaller canines. The way they related to each other was changing. They were becoming less aggressive, maybe more cooperative. And the second thing that happened was that we stood up. Bipedalism. Toumaï might have done it. Orrorin might have done it. Ardi was definitely doing it in her own unique way. Lucy was an expert at it. This was the foundational shift in our lineage. We committed to a new way of moving through the world. And we did it for millions of years with a small, ape-sized brain. The big brains came much, much later. The first members of our own genus, Homo, appeared around 2.5 million years ago. They started making stone tools. Their brains were getting a little bigger. But the truly explosive growth in brain size didn't happen until much later, with species like Homo erectus and eventually us. So, the story is backwards from what we once thought. We didn't get smart, then stand up. We changed our social lives, then we stood up. And only after millions of years of walking the earth on two legs did we develop the big brains that we prize so much today. Our feet made us human, long before our heads did. Answering the question, who was our ancestor before Lucy, is not just about naming a species. It's about understanding a process. It's about seeing our origins not as a single event, but as a long, slow, stumbling journey. It was a journey taken by creatures who were not apes and not humans, but something in between. Here are creatures like Ardi, who lived in two worlds, the trees and the ground. creatures who were trying out a new way to live in a changing Africa. We carry the legacy of that journey in our own bodies. Every time you stand up, you are using a pelvic structure that began to take shape with Ardi. Every time you walk, you are putting weight on a foot that has been modified from a grasping ape-like appendage. Our bad backs, our sore knees, our twisted ankles are the price we pay for this ancient adaptation. Bipedalism is a brilliant solution, but it's not a perfect one. It's a classic example of evolution cobbling something together from parts that were originally designed for something else. The search for these ancestors continues. Every year, teams of scientists go out into the harsh landscapes of Africa looking for small fragments of bone that can rewrite our story. It is slow, difficult work. But every now and then, they find something. A tooth. Of a jaw. Maybe, if they are incredibly lucky, a skeleton like Ardi or Lucy. And with each discovery, the picture becomes a little bit clearer. But the ghostly figures of our past come into sharper focus. So while Ardi is the best answer we have today for who came before Lucy, the final answer is still out there, buried in the ground, waiting to be found. The story of human evolution is the ultimate detective story, and it's a story about all of us. It's the story of where we came from. It's the story of a small, strange ape that, against all odds, stood up and began a journey that would eventually lead to us. And the beginning of that journey didn't start with Lucy. It started much earlier, in a quiet woodland, with a creature who dared to walk in a new way.